In this week's episode, we talk to Melyssa Zurasky about what it's like to work in the film industry, healing from trauma, and philosophies that can carry us to greater heights when we align both our body and spirit.
I didn't feel safe in my own body. I had no idea how to talk to my inner child or anything like that, or just myself. And yoga got me to a place where the Sanskrit word of yoga literally means to yoke. So to link together mind and body, or self and body, and just get yourself into this place where you can notice how you feel.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Humanity Skuru. This is episode number 3, and today's guest is our dear friend, Melyssa Zurasky.
Hey, how
Hi,
are
how's it
ya?
going, Melyssa?
It's going. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Can't complain.
Can't complain. All right.
Oh,
Okay.
good. Oh,
Let's
yeah.
start.
Is it? That is pretty funny because normally I have a lot to complain about, which is mostly
No, it's actually my favorite pastime. Can we talk about
complaining.
it? Complaining. Yes.
We're starting off. Just first thing is just into what irritates you about the world.
Yes, let's go. No, I'm just
Okay.
kidding. I'm not kidding, but we won't go there today. It's fine. Maybe a different time.
You're not kidding. You are a complainer. You were just not going to start
I
off.
wish I wasn't. I wish I wasn't.
Do you feel that you are?
I do.
Do
I
you
do.
complain? To whom do you complain?
I know my therapist makes me journal it, but
Oh, well,
my
I mean, that's like,
therapist.
I think it's a proper outlet. It's not like you're just going down the street or writing bad Yelp reviews consistently.
There was a time.
Oh,
There was
they're
an
also
angry Melissa time
tapping into
that I
the
would do
past.
that.
Okay.
So look
Okay.
me up on Yelp.
Is your Yelp username just your name?
I actually don't know.
Okay,
Honestly,
then maybe we're okay.
it's been, it might be my gamer tag name, but
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
Is that something you want to share? Because I'm curious. Is it something that's like abstract or like?
No, it's literally just been my gamer tag name since I was in middle school, which is kind
Oh,
of embarrassing,
I was gonna
but
say some of
also really
those.
fun.
Good. Okay. Okay.
Because it
Good.
was really fun back in the day when I used to like play competitively because it was Princess Liara.
Oh,
And so,
okay.
like, they knew they were getting their butt kicked by a girl because, like,
That's right.
guys in the gaming world had, like, a problem with that,
They
so
struggle with that. That's an
they
interesting.
struggle
That
with that.
actually might be a really interesting conversation. I hadn't even planned on really bringing that up, but I think now that we've sort of actually addressed that at some point, I'd like to sort of return to this. I think that's a good
100%.
talking point. But what I wanted to do is introduce you as well. I know you for two things. I guess I know you for video gaming. It's primarily because that's how we met.
Yeah.
Until LANFest, I believe. But
Gosh, that was so
also
long ago.
a long time ago, absolutely,
Long
the
time
Circle
ago.
of New Mexico, and but you are at this point, I think, primarily, if I'm not mistaken, a casting agent.
Yes, I'm a casting
Okay,
director. Yeah.
casting director. So, if you
Mhm.
don't mind, real quick, what specifically do you do?
Um, so I work for a company. It's a Leslie Hardigan Casting. We do mostly extras casting, but sometimes we also do principal casting. Um, I am the key casting director, which is just a fancy title for being like, hey, you basically run things and make sure people are there. Um, and essentially, my day is spent with either I'm in meetings all day, being told what this episode's going to look like, or this movie, or whatever. And then we get a breakdown. We do looks. We post on Instagram about it or Facebook about it. We also have a database that we search into. So if we need 30 cops, I just look for cop types, and
Sure.
yeah, and that's
Okay,
really it.
and by like
Yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, you're basically just sort of throwing the reel out there and saying, "Hey, we need like a dark-skinned male in his late 30s with a bunch of video game tattoos. Like, what do
Yeah,
we got?" Okay.
exactly. No, you think that's silly, but you'd be, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, surprised sometimes of what we're looking. I think one time we actually had to get like a genital double for someone, and
Fascinating.
we're
Like,
yeah,
well,
like
okay. So,
full.
wow. So you need like a
Yeah.
full-on body type replica
Yes.
down
Include
to like,
yes.
I'm going to presume the cup size.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. Yeah,
Fascinating. I
it was a fun time.
Okay, and so what would a body double be used for unless is it like a stunt body double, or was it just, "We need a
Uh,
strong silhouette for a certain shot"? Like, what is now I'm kind of
s
curious.
so there's that, like, Friends joke. I don't know if you ever watched Friends, but Joey was the butt double for someone or was
Interesting.
auditioning for the butt double of someone, and that's simply what it is. It's just if an actor doesn't feel comfortable showing full nudity or,
Oh,
like,
I see.
showing their backside, you
Okay,
get
that
someone that's, like, close
I
to
should have
their
inferred
look,
that.
their
Yeah,
sizes, and all that jazz.
I see. I
Yeah.
see. Okay, I suppose that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so, like, you've got a pretty wide sort of like net, I'm sure, of like things you get to look for. And really, again, you might have something that's very broad, 30 cops, but also, really, it might be late 40s tattoo guy. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you've seen, like, I mean, a pretty incredible range. Are there any that you saw that were just sort of like, this is almost so specific? I don't know if we can find this effectively.
All the time,
All the
honestly,
time. Okay.
all the time, and somehow it happens, and I'm still amazed. I'm still to this day amazed when we make it happen. The genital one was definitely out there because they were asking for we talked about this not being a explicit podcast, but
Oh,
here
sure.
we
We're
are.
fine.
Here we
We're fine.
are.
We're fine.
But like they wanted like small, and so I had to literally go through photos of like male
Wow.
genitalia and like
Okay.
to look for this.
So this is all
Um
right. So is this something that, like, also if you were uncomfortable with, could you just pass off to somebody else and be like, "Look, I trust your judgment." I or is it because like you're sort of like top brass of the casting directors, like it's sort of like, well, we're going to defer to you because nobody else wants to do it, but you have to do it.
Yeah, it's kinda like it's your job. You gotta
Okay.
do this. Sometimes, like, there are moments where I'll be like, "Hey, my poor assistant." I've done this a few times, but my poor assistant, there's been times where I'm just like, "I can't handle looking for this. I don't want to, and I just don't have the brain capacity," and so I'll defer it to him.
Okay.
He's never complained, but at the same time, I know deep down he's just like, "Melissa just doesn't wanna do this." You're correct. You are
We are
correct.
less than 10
Yes.
minutes in and we're talking about like body parts. And so is this something when you signed up for the job? I mean, because
Mhm.
how did you even get to this point? Like, is it something that you thought would happen, or like did it occur to you? Because I'm sure you constantly see new things and qualifiers you might not have been prepared for.
Um, the funny I did not get this job in any type of normal way by any means.
Go
I
on.
I lived in New York. I was an intern for an onset casting, coach for like little kids. So he worked on like Enchanted, Racing Stripes, just a lot of kid stuff. And I was his assistant for a few years. I also was pursuing a modeling and acting career, but then things happened here back at home. And where, my grandma passed away and she was basically
Mm.
my mom. And so I came back home and I was just kind of like, where do I go from here? I knew that there was an industry here, but it was so small. It's nothing like what it is today.
What
Um,
era is this? Like, what time period?
2017
17.
is when I
Okay. Oh,
moved
so it's
back.
only about 5 years ago, really.
Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yes. But this was still also before like Netflix signed their contract here
Sure.
and HBO was looking for grounds and stuff like that.
Okay.
So it was still fairly new-ish. I mean, it'd been
Hmm.
happening, but we only got Westerns, right? That was what
Right.
we had,
Right.
was
Yeah, we
just
get
the
a lot of
Westerns.
sand, so sure.
Yeah. And basically what happened is I started doing background work because I didn't have a job here and I still was like, I don't know if I want to go back and do acting or if I want to continue the model life because that was a whole other story of its own that came with its own problems. And I remember I did background work a few times and there was just a posting for an assistant and it was from my now boss and I just submitted. That's it. And a friend of mine at the time sent in like a little text because they were friends and it was like, hey, this person's reliable.
Mhm.
This is kind of their background if you really want to take a look at her. And I got called onto Cosmos. just to work a day. And
Was that to sort of,
basically,
like, gauge how well you're able to, like, do this?
yeah, pretty much it was just like they just needed a day player. They just needed someone to start calling up people. And well, my boss at the time, who was the key casting director of Cosmos, was just doing what he needed to do, and I just needed to do the brunt work, right? And
Mhm.
so I showed up and I called people, and then I didn't hear back for a while. And then all of a sudden they needed help on Stargirl, Disney Stargirl,
Okay.
and I was like, yeah, sure, I'm available. And I worked 3 days on that, and then didn't hear much after that. And then all of a sudden they needed help on interrogation, and I that's when I became a full-time assistant. And then right after interrogation ended, I kind of got thrown into the deep end when our company started growing. The New Mexico industry here was just booming, and they're like, "So you want to be a key casting director?" And I was like, "I have no idea how to do that." And they're like, "Oh, great. Okay, well, here's the first meeting to Briar Patch." So Briar Patch was my
Wow.
first show that I keyed, and after only 3 times of assisting on different shows, and I just kind of figured it out as I went.
Okay. So sort of
That's really all it was.
threw yourself into it. Now, with something
Yeah,
like that, especially in New York, you were doing acting a little bit
yeah, hmm,
and some modeling stuff. So you had a small glimpse into just sort of like what the industry is like.
right.
Um, I'm sure you get to see sort of when the behind the scenes stuff goes. Who's running the show, how they're kind of doing it. But when you get sort of popped into a job like this, do you feel like, oh God, like imposter syndrome? Like people are trusting me, and I don't think they should.
Yeah, all the
Oh,
time.
all
No,
the time.
all the time. No, there's there's moments because you watch a movie and you think of just the actors, and you think of the lines and the dialogue and the cinematography, but you don't really think about the in a coffee shop scene, the people who are in the coffee shop and the person who's the barista and like the person who's going up to order. You don't really think about them. But then as soon as you remove them from a scene, that scene seems silly. It
It
just
changes,
doesn't
sure.
it changes everything about it.
Yeah,
And there's just some moments where I'm just like, if I just decided not to do my job, this would just be silly. Like all of it would just be wrong and
sure.
silly. And there are moments all the time where we're just on intense deadlines because what people don't say about the film industry is it's glamorous, but it's work. Like it's
Mhm.
we're talking 90-hour weeks sometimes.
I can only
Um
imagine.
yeah. And we're on a short deadline. We have to turn people around the next day. We have to somehow, in the COVID world, find out how to get them tested. Disney policy makes everyone be vaccinated. That's their policy. And you have to make sure that they're validated. You have to make sure that they can test, that they show up for testing. They started paying people to go test now because
Oh,
nobody would
wow.
show up for testing. Yeah. um and like it's just stuff like that where it's just like, okay, so if nobody shows, this entire scene is just going to look really dumb. um and so I just have to do it. It's what has to be done.
So, when it comes to
So
casting, like, are you generally in charge of casting, like, I mean, like the large scale, like lead actors in any specific show, or is it mostly sort of because, like you said, the background is one of the most important parts of the scene. If you don't have the mechanics of like a background working, it looks unnatural. I mean,
yeah,
absolutely ridiculous. It's like movie music. If you don't have a music or a soundtrack in some parts of a film, it feels uncomfortable and awful.
yeah.
So, if you had the choice between sort of keeping like the bigger picture looking full or casting like leads, what do you think it is that like most appeals to you?
For me, I do like the background casting a little bit more. For me, it gives me a little bit more of a creative edge.
Oh, sure.
Um, just because I can go to a meeting, and sometimes people are really, directors are very particular about who they want to see in a scene and what they want to do, and they'll picture pick people. So they'll want to see like packets of people ahead of time. But sometimes, like, They don't, and they're like, "Yeah, we want people for this scene." I
Mhm.
remember on Interrogation, they said, "We want prisoners," and we want it to be realistic to, I think it was 1980s
Mm,
at the
mhm.
time, is kinda what we were trying to portray, and so what we had to do was we had to go and do research of, like, what was the prison system like in the 1980s?
Sure, looking at clothing
Like,
styles and, like,
yeah, and
actual, like
haircuts, what
oh,
was
sure,
like,
sure.
were they allowed to have facial hair? Did they have to have buzz cuts? What did that look like? Did they, segregate? Did they all of this, and so I learned a whole lot about the 1980s prison system, which is not something I usually would be able to do or even think of, to be completely honest. Um, but it's just those random moments where you just have to do we're working on Big Sky right now,
Mhm.
and it's based in Montana.
Well, that's kinda
Okay.
cool because it's like this is like historical research almost.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. It's a lot of fun, and it gives you, you have to go and be like, "Okay, what is Montana's demographic? What does it generally look like?" And, obviously, we fluff it a bit because if you look into it, like, it's a very white crowd, and we don't want that by any means,
Mhm.
um but it's just a lot of you get more of creativity when you're
Mhm.
doing background casting rather than
That
just
makes sense.
looking for that it factor that you are in principal casting. So yeah,
Right. Paul Rudd sort of sells himself in a scene, but you need something
right.
behind him that makes it feel like and sometimes, I mean, shoot, for a comedy, you also might want something in the background that's sort of innocuously humorous that doesn't
Hmm.
detract, but also if you're watching a movie a second or third time, you might notice it and be like, that's ridiculous and fun.
Yeah, yeah,
So do you
yeah.
ever like get the chance to throw in like weird Easter eggs into the background? You know, I'd imagine like you want
Sometimes.
to keep things probably pretty with a lot of continuity, but that actually begs the question because I well, this is something I love about films is that they're made by people, therefore they're prone to being imperfect, and I
Mhm.
love watching sort of like movie errors. You know,
Right.
not because I want anybody to feel bad about their job, but because it's like, hey, this movie's great, but also it's fun to like nitpick little things here and there just because. So, is that something that you enjoy looking into, or does that like sort of stress you out to think that like people are gonna nitpick this stuff?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it is what it is. We can only do as much as we can do. I remember there's this in Big Sky, there's this place called the Shady Lane Motel. They haven't done it much this season, but in season 2, if you go and look, there's this they wanted an old lady in a bikini. And this old lady in bikini was just it for the Shady Lane Motel. She sold it completely as to what the vibe they were looking for.
Okay.
So there's little things like that where you get to kind of like throw her in every once in a while. Was she used all the time? No, but she was there every single time they were at the Shady Lane Motel. Um, just
So
little
like
things like that.
the viewer comes to like expect certain little like traits.
Yeah,
Okay, that's kind of
exactly.
fun.
Hmm.
So, okay, and then with you being behind the scenes, this is something that happens in a lot of industries. You get to see how the sausage is made all the time.
Hmm.
Now, does that ever detract from your enjoyment of watching films and movies that you haven't worked on or TV shows? Uh, or like, do you sit there and get too critical of like thinking about stuff in the background instead of focusing on what's actually supposed to be presented?
Well, as a background casting director, I do watch the background a lot more than I think normal people do.
Sure.
Because there'll be times where I'm just watching a movie, and I think I did it with the Avengers the other day. Like, we were watching it, and all of a sudden there was like some guy in the background, like he was running away from like monster or whatever, and he's like doing this thing, and I was
Oh
just like,
wow.
oh no. Like, oh, that
Like
background actor, like
nearly
nobody.
upstaging part of a
Oh.
scene or something. Wow.
Little things that you
Okay.
don't normally look at, right?
Sure, sure, sure.
But because I'm looking at the background a little bit more, you pick up on those things. There's some people who just do not know how to drink out of a cup. I know.
Do you
I'm
need
not
to give
sure
people
why.
like a class in like how to look natural like a human?
Apparently, no, you'd actually be surprised because a lot of acting is just trying to be human and being authentic, right? That's
Sure.
that's really what you're trying to do is just portray authenticity. Um,
I
Go
suppose.
ahead,
I mean, there's
sorry.
something called the Hawthorne effect, which is if you
Right.
know you're being observed, you act differently. And so I can only imagine that like people who would do something very easily otherwise, the moment they hear, roll
To hear
or whatever
action. Yep.
action, yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Um, s- Something changes, something snaps in their brain, and it's sort of like I have to raise my hand to my mouth with the cup in it, and like they're looking at like something weird because they're focusing now so hard on doing something they would never even think about.
Exactly. And,
Fascinating.
it's funny because 'cause you'll have, like, a coffee cup, right? So, a coffee cup has some weight to it if there's something in it,
Right.
right? But when you're on a scene and you're on a set, like, you can't always have it's an empty cup. That's what it
Sure.
is.
Sure.
But then you got people that are just, like, talking, they got some hands flying around, they go to drink it, and they're just, like, up here, and you're like,
Chugging
"Gosh,
hot coffee with
come
no second
on."
thoughts.
No second thoughts at all. They flung coffee on someone else over there, that poor person.
Sure.
But it's just yeah, little things like
So
that.
then the one side of it is that you get to watch these things and sort of critically just go, God, what are they doing? But I'm sure
Yeah.
there's also a lot of times when you see something that's done well and you go, oh crap, I could learn from that.
Yeah.
You know?
No, 100%.
I'm sure you've probably taken some stuff away. Are there any films or like shows that you found noteworthy that you just look at it and just go, man, like these guys nailed it? You know?
Um, I'm
Here's the catch: you can't talk about your own works.
well, I'm great no, honestly, I wouldn't think that. Um, so here's the hard thing is what immediately came to my mind would be Wonder Woman and, like, all of the amazing, you know I think they were stunts, though.
Mhm.
That's the real problem, is maybe a few of them were, background artists, but I think a lot of them were stunts, and the reason why I go to that is just because all of them just had this, like, beautiful stoic face, um, and also they all seemed so strong, and they carried themselves so well. It's almost like you had to do, like, a little master class of for all of these women, um, just on how to carry yourself as a warrior. And that was so fascinating and phenomenal to me, at least.
Sure.
Um, but yeah,
So that actually begs another question: is we're seeing, I think, as time has progressed, um, and the movement is sort of like a slow moving one, but like we are starting to see a slow progression of strong feminist uh, accommodations in many industries, which is really cool. You're seeing a lot more writers and casters and directors and producers and scripties, and like I mean, like it's really lead actresses who are maybe finally getting paid the same as male counterparts, but also still not always. There's still going to be a
mhm,
disparity. But are you seeing that like right now you might be surrounding yourself with more of a strong feminine influence that's really uplifting the industry? I'm sure there's still a lot to contend with, but
yeah,
what's from your perspective? I mean, what are you sort of observing?
the industry is trying. Obviously, there's critiques to everything. I think the a lot of the problem is people are so focused on numbers that they're like, "Oh my gosh, we have so many working and so many women working on our team," or "We have so many people of color working on our teams," or
Hmm.
whatever, which is like great and dandy, but it's not a bragging point, right? Like we should
Right.
be uplifting these people because they're amazing and creative and
Treating them equally, I'd like to think, right? That's
right,
the
and
goal.
actually treating them equally and not
Sure.
just as a number.
Yeah.
And what I see very often is people getting so excited about that number, which again, on paper looks great, but at the same time, how are we treating these people?
Right.
And I won't name the shows, won't get into it, but
No.
I've been on a few shows even more recently that the way that some men in particular would talk to me as a woman as um and this is in no way to boast by any means, but like as an attractive female, there's a way that they automatically start talking to me.
Sure.
And it's frustrating. It's frustrating, right? Like, I'm not Melissa, I am pretty female in the
Right.
room.
Right.
And we can talk about that in all facets of life, right? There's almost this demeanor change of I am automatically thought of as weaker, as less than, um, or a little too emotional, as someone literally has called me when the reality is it was just inappropriate the way that a department head was talking to myself and my team. Um, and
Wow.
it's just it's a headache. Like it's hard to deal with. I think the industry really is attempting, and it's so great to see women finally getting great recognition for their work.
Sure.
I just wish it was more of we're giving them recognition because they're talented and amazing and they have something to offer to the table rather than just it's a number that I need to
Yeah.
fulfill to look
Hey,
good.
look, we employed
Right.
40% more women on this show. Give us
Yeah,
some kudos. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And it's like nobody should be giving you a round of applause for that. I'm sorry, but
Or it
like
should be
it
a
shouldn't be that
standard.
way. It should
It
be a
should be a
standard. Like
yeah, it should be not even noteworthy because it's like, "Hey,
right.
we're meeting the baseline," as opposed to, "Congratulate us for meeting the baseline."
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. And that's how
okay.
I feel about it. Yeah.
Well, I can imagine that the I mean, well, the media industry in general has had issues with this for a very long time. Um, and if I'm not mistaken, so you said you were doing some modeling and such out in New York,
Yeah.
and I can't even begin to imagine the stress and headache and social expectation of what it's like to be a model.
Yeah, I mean, so I moving back here, I honestly have been doing a lot of healing in an eating disorder. It's the expectation all the time and the competition that continues to be forced on us.
Hmm.
Um, Especially as a Y2K kid, it's just, that era in and of itself of just you have to be paper thin, and then
Right.
it's just continued. It's never stopped. It hasn't. And
Sure.
as much as we'd like to say that we're body positive, it's we're not there. We're really honestly not.
Yeah, I'm still seeing a
Um,
lot of contention with that from a lot of famous actresses that post about the stresses of feeling like, look, the heroin chic look is not it, guys.
Right. It's just not. The reality is our bodies are just simply not shaped that way, and the only
Right.
way that I was able to achieve it was just starving. Like, that's
And that
it.
sounds awful. I mean, you should be able to eat a piece of
Like
pizza, as far as I'm concerned, whenever you like. And the
right.
moment you sort of like put all this away, you can just go to Dion's and eat half a pizza and be like, I don't care at all.
Mhm.
You
No,
know?
and it's very true, and that's part of the reason why I was like, I do still have an agent, and I do still audition when I get them, but it stopped becoming my main focus, and it's simply because of the fact that my mental health wasn't okay, and I saw so many other women. So Bob Luke, the guy that I interned with in New York, he had another intern that I worked with, and she often, on many occasions, would compare. She would compare herself to me
Oh yeah.
consistently,
Yeah.
and she was just built differently than me, and that's literally it. And, it was just so toxic, and that's not the first place. It's
Right.
not the first time. It's you show up to a room of 30 other girls who look almost exactly like you because 'cause they're looking for a redhead with green eyes that is a certain height to play this role, and 4 of them are skinnier than you automatically know that they'll probably fit the clothes better, and that sucks, and they'll get to the screen test if you even make it to the screen test, and, whether or not they have more authenticity or more to bring or more emotion or better acting in general
Hmm.
than you, it doesn't quite matter. It still matters, but
Yeah.
that other person is gonna have a one up on you.
Right.
It sucks, but that's the reality.
Sure.
I wish it wasn't that way, but
What
that
do you
is what
think
I
is
experienced.
Sure, and I mean, from your perspective, being sort of like entrenched in like all of this, what do you think uh, is a good step forward? I mean, obviously, if you could just, hit the button and say, "Let's solve this," you'd do it. But in terms of like, what is the place to begin? How do we, people who are listening, uh, how do we help emphasize? How do we help support? How do we help, promote a better, not just body positivity, but I mean, like, a healthy relationship with the bodies of women, not making it a competition, not making it into this dog eat dog kind of game. Because unfortunately, I mean, like you just said, the moment you're sort of like put in this thing where you just want to simply be a model because you have a good time and you're doing this thing, you're defaulted to competition.
Yeah.
So
That's
what
a
do you
hard
think?
question. That's a
Sure.
hard question just because there's so many things that go into it, right? We can look
Yeah.
at American Top Model. That was a problematic show, and don't get me wrong, I watched every single episode when I was younger,
A
but
friend I went
it
to
was
high
a
school with
huge.
was in that show, yeah.
Right, yeah, and it was a good, show at the time,
It was
but then you
entertaining.
look. Right, right. But then you look back on it and you're just like, "Oh my gosh, the body shaming, the consistent body shaming,
Yeah,
the consistent of your body type is not model type."
right.
Um, and then the fact that, there are a lot of great companies that I think are, when it comes to not just acting, but just simply modeling. Aerie's a good one where they don't edit any of their photos
Hmm,
whatsoever. It's just the woman wearing the clothes. Things like that, I think, are really strong emphasis of, oh, this person who's wearing this clothing like actually looks like me.
right, yeah,
um,
that's very
right?
encouraging, I'm sure.
So encouraging. Um, I think the hard thing though is just empathy all around.
Sure.
That's my I want to hone that like so badly where it's just the simple fact of the matter is you can look at someone who might, by doctor terms only, obese,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
But you have no idea their life. You have
Right.
no idea like what even medical issues. You don't know their mental space. You don't know if like they're healthy, right? Like they could be working out every single day and that's just where their body lays. That's
Mhm.
just where it has been laying. And you don't know, right? And so the moment that we can just step back and accept that, and I want to emphasize this on men too, because that's mainly where a lot of the criticism comes from.
Yeah,
That we start
absolutely.
competing. Why are we competing? Because this woman who is hotter than me is going to be more interesting or attractive to this man that I really, really like, even though we are friends more. And the guy sometimes will just go ahead and choose the attractive person rather than the friend that you have more intimate conversations with or could see yourself actually living life with. And that is what something, I don't know. And just the empathy. I want to hone back to the empathy of just people are people. They're
Yeah.
not objects, they're not things that you can mold. And I think as soon as people start to realize that more,
Mhm.
the world in general would be a better place, but the modeling world would be a better place and just all around. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think something that I hear a lot, this is sort of echoed in like, again, like the gaming sphere, is some people just say that's just the way it is. And sure, but what if instead of just accepting it, we looked into ways to start like changing our behavior and trying to lead by example?
Mhm,
Empathy, I think, on so many fronts is a great place to start. But you also said something that I think is huge: is body shaming. Because
mhm,
I think even innocuously, we, or subconsciously we'll say, we tend to sort of gravitate towards, if we want to make a statement about something, we have to make a statement about it physically. I know a lot of people, uh, certainly not into, former President Donald Trump, and the guy was maybe not necessarily the greatest dude, but also when you start seeing things about him that are in relation to what he looks like, what his weight, his body shape, then those things become problematic because you're finding a pass, you're finding an excuse to say, well, if I justify why I don't like somebody, then I can justify why I'm bullying somebody. And that's very dangerous territory, because if you start, skirting one line, that habit, that mannerism sort of
Mhm.
continues. And body shaming is, you can say a lot of different things, but really trying to keep that off the table. I think, the guy's dangerous, the guy's a sociopath. We can talk about a lot of different things, in fact, or how he's affected people, but maybe the conversation should not, go based off of the fact that like all bodies are anatomically just unique and that's the way of it.
Yeah, let's talk about someone's character and not stray for that. Like,
Right, precisely. Things that they can change. A body is a much harder thing to
right.
change, if at all, because we're born into it, and we can only do so much.
Mhm.
So,
And I mean, sure, we can starve it and we can whatever, all the eating disorders in the world, but at the end of the day, like, your body's gonna sit somewhere, and can we
right.
stop? Let's just stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Let's go to people and let's talk to them, look them in the eye, get to know them and their character, and then what does anything else matter? Like, you the
Yeah.
example of Donald Trump is just like, we can, say, like, "Your character's kinda garbage." It doesn't mean, "Oh, fat man bad." Like, that why does
Right.
fat man equal bad? Like, that doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
Well,
Like,
because
that's
a very
not
dangerous part of that is the moment you start saying those things, people who are around you
right,
that hear you that might have these body dysmorphia images or other problems will look at you as, oh, you're no longer safe because clearly that's something that's acceptable to attack.
right. And
And so,
what's
yeah,
why do we wanna become unsafe? I don't
right, absolutely. I think we want to try to be sanctuary for people, a safe place to go, a safe place, or even to redirect. If we can't end up
mhm,
providing that for somebody, but at least we're not actively harming people. I think is right. The goal, as far as I'm concerned.
exactly, and I agree 100%.
Oh, good, perfect. My favorite podcast guest. Okay. Um, so you've done the film industry, and I'm sure you've had a lot of really great experiences. I'm sure you have a lot of really tough experiences.
Yeah.
What was it like when you're in the middle of just looking at it all and just thinking, God, is this where I want to be? Is this too much? Is this too hard? Because I know that like in the middle of my game store career, there's been a couple times where I've had breakdowns. I just go, oh God, is this where I want to be? That's a tough position to be in when it's a job I should love.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about you and, because you're still in the industry and
Mhm.
maybe your relationship with it, shifts consistently. But have you ever just had a moment when you were looking at this and just thinking, and maybe it's when you moved from New York back here, and that might have been a part of the big shift for you.
Yeah.
But as it stands, like your relationship with it right now, what's that like?
My relationship with it right now is pretty tough. I think you and I have talked about this in the past as well. I love film. I think for the longest time, my dream was I want to just create things that make people think, that maybe people start thinking beyond their worldview, right? And the issue is to get to that point, it is so much politics, and it's not a fun game to play. It really isn't. It's a lot of, excuse my language, but ass kissing. Like, it's just consistent, that, or you have to know someone. Like, the only way that I got this job is because someone was like, "Yeah, I vouched for her," and then here I am. Like, that's the
A
only
very
way.
networking heavy game.
Yeah, it's extremely networking, and you can walk into a room and pitch an idea, but if someone doesn't know who you are or know that where their billions of dollars at times, right, are gonna go, why are you worth their time? Why are you
Right.
worth their effort?
Yeah.
Um, and that's why you see a lot of amazing indie films that necessarily don't get big budgets or whatever, but the thing with indie films is you have to kill yourself to do indie films. I have worked on a few of them, and gosh, the crew of those things. I've only acted in indie films for the most part.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I've done some shorts and some 48 hours, but not a full-on feature, and, the people who do indie films are dedicated. That's the only word that I can give them, is they're just willing to do it all. And there's some moments where I look at it and I'm just like, "I don't know if I'm willing to do it all."
I feel like you'd
You
have to be
know?
extremely dedicated because I mean, you might push your project, your passion to the point of near bankruptcy because, like, you have no choice. These things are so expensive, and you're not getting a budget from like a larger production company. you're
Mhm.
really having to hope and bank that like this is going to work out.
Yeah, exactly. And there's been multiple times that we did a few years back when I first moved here, I did Millennium Bugs, and it was a indie film that I did. And it 100% was they did an Indiegogo and that was the budget. Like that was it. And
Oh wow.
so the minutes, you're on the clock. And the minutes that you eat up, the amount of takes that you eat up, which turn into time, which the locations, right? You can't necessarily afford the location for a second night. So like
Right.
you have to finish up your work. You have to get that shot. You have to keep it moving. And you're doing it for free most of the time. Some of the
I was
time,
gonna say,
it's
I feel like a lot of people,
like
again, the passion project part is like you're paying certain people because like that's how you get them to do work for you. But also,
yeah,
if you're sort of striking it out on your own, you're having to sort of eat a lot out of pocket, or simply not eat at all, as it were, because you need the thing to happen.
exactly. Yes, and you take all of your money and you already went broke making this passion project that you love and that means so much to you, and then you have to spend a couple $100 here and there to submit it to some festivals to even get noticed or seen or to hope maybe it gets picked up, and it's
Right.
crazy, and so it's a lot about networking, it's a lot about who you know and if you have the means to do it too.
Hmm.
Um, it also is a lot of work. It just simply
I
is.
can't
I
even
talked
begin to
about
imagine.
90-hour weeks sometimes.
Yeah.
Not on all shows, but on some shows, I would average
Hmm.
90 hours, and it
How
eats
do
your life.
unions
You
feel
know,
about that?
we are a non-union state here in New Mexico, and
Oh
so in
yeah.
other states, sure. Here, and then the second thing is casting directors don't have a union, which I
Oh,
think is a
so
problem
like
as well.
actors, there's gonna be an actors union, but not necessarily production unit unions.
Mhm.
Oh
There are
no,
some, like ADs have
but not
unions
casting
and
directors.
stuff like that.
Okay,
Casting directors don't. No,
you're just on your own. Good luck for
you're
90
just
hours a week. Jeez,
it's great. I had no life for a while there.
I can't even
Um,
imagine.
yeah,
So now it
it's
sounds
not
like
fun.
yeah, I can imagine that as much as you love it, like it's probably got to be very exhausting. Now you're back in New Mexico and you're still involved in the industry, but you've
Mhm.
also struck it out with something that as far as I'm concerned, is extraordinarily good for the physical health, for the soul, for the mind, for sort of aligning oneself. And you now teach a yoga class.
I do. I do. I wanted to start with one because I'm still in the industry and that's all I can teach.
Mhm.
Um, but yoga, we could have a whole other podcast when it comes to yoga because
Just a
I
full
just
yoga
love that
cast
topic. And just a
every
full
week. Let's
yoga
yeah,
cast. Let's do it.
perfect.
Um, no, but this sounds weird and a little preachy, but it kind of saved me in a lot of ways.
Nothing weird about
Um,
that, and preach away because I feel like people need to hear that like something like this can change your life, and I want to
right,
know how this
right.
changes your life.
Well, so the thing is I found yoga in my apartment in New York. I lived in a tiny little box and I couldn't really afford a gym at the time even though I was working 3 jobs because again, it's New York. So what do you what can you afford, honestly?
Yeah, right.
Um and I found this YouTube channel called Boho Beautiful and her voice just lulls me to sleep. It's beautiful. But anyway, so I started doing yoga and it was in the midst of time where I was literally working 3 jobs. I was interning and doing auditions. It was just a crazy time. And it was a place where I could just rest. And then I remember I went through a really bad breakup during that time as well. And panic attacks started ramping up. I do deal with, anxiety disorder. And it was a place where I could just go and go into my body, which is something that I never really understood at that time. Um, especially because you don't have to get into all of it, but I do have a lot of childhood trauma. And so a lot of my ways of coping was to just avoid, right? And so I would
Mm.
watch a
Mhm.
show, I would always have something going on in the background. I always am playing a game, I'm doing whatever. Played a lot of Destiny in that apartment. But but really it was an opportunity for me to finally just sit with myself, which was something was so hard to do. Because in the midst of an ED disorder, of trying to be an actor and a model where everyone's nitpicking you, uh, you kind of didn't feel safe. You didn't love yourself. Like I didn't
Mhm.
love myself. I didn't feel safe in my own body. I had no idea how to talk to my inner child or anything like that, or just myself. And yoga got me to a place where the Sanskrit word of yoga literally means to yoke. So to link together mind and body, or self and body, um, and just get yourself into this place where you can notice how you feel. Where are your thoughts going to? How does your body feel?
Mhm.
Where are you tight within your body? And let's investigate why. And let's ask that question. Oh, this is a really hard pose. Let's push past it because we're stronger. We're better than this. Like,
Mhm.
we can do this. Our body is so capable of this. A lot of our physical things of I can't do this, or this is too hard, or I'm out of breath, or whatever is simply just a mental game. And so once you can kind of go in, tap in, and just create the safe space for yourself, it's kind of interesting what your body can do.
And
So,
so finding a place to start, I think that might exercise is usually like the biggest roadblock is that people don't know
right.
where to begin because they want to hit the ground running, but you can't exactly. You got to sort of train your body to sort of like build up to these things. And yoga is very accepting of do what you can,
Yeah.
as far as I
No, 100.
understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. I think, but what's also really great about yoga, um, and we'll get into this briefly, is that uh, a lot of spiritual philosophy that does not stand with like a specific denomination, it's very welcoming, it's very open, it's a very non-judgmental, and because it's not like a preachy kind of thing, you say it's preachy that you want to talk about yoga, and that's great because it worked for you,
Right.
but yoga feels very open to anybody who wishes to give it a shot. So as far as welcoming people in, like, I mean, what is your recommendation to anybody listening who might not be in Albuquerque, but like, looking for like a local yoga spot,
Yep.
what to look for? Um, I mean, like, what's your recommendation for at least sort of like taking that first step?
I would go back to where I started. YouTube video. You don't have to go. I know for a lot of people, it's really weird to go in an in-person class, especially post-pandemic, right? We have so many anxiety disorders and like social disorders that have come from just the pandemic in general, that it's okay. Like you can do something from your home. There's some great, great people online that would be willing to just teach you from the comfort of your own four walls. And so I say if you feel uncomfortable with going to somewhere locally, do that. If you want to do an in-person class, there's a few options. Usually it depends if you want to do kind of a hot yoga, which is all the rave, right, in North America,
I've tried a couple times, and
right now.
holy smokes, it is exhausting.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
incredibly hard work,
It's a whole thing.
right?
If you it just depends what you wanna do, right? Just if you wanna go in person, what are you looking for? And be honest with yourself. Are you
Sure.
looking for something that's gonna kick your butt and that's gonna be a workout, or do you need something that's a little more gentle? There are things I teach a gentle yoga class, and it doesn't mean that we don't go hard or whatever, because there are some poses that are difficult that I'll sometimes throw in here and there. But it simply means like I am going to make sure that I'm creating a space that is very gentle, that everything I say is a suggestion, and I'm going to make sure you know
Hmm.
that you can modify whatever, and you're accepted, you're okay, you're fine. So yeah, it's a lot of just go and try, go
Hmm.
see, just Google in your area, or even look on Instagram. A lot of times, I've experienced some of my favorite yoga teachers just simply because they're doing yoga in the park. Um,
That's fun.
yeah, yeah. You just Google what's happening, or do the hashtag in Instagram. Um, any of those things. But yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, because yoga, I've only done it a handful of times. I've come to a handful of your classes. I've tried hot yoga some years back, but one of the biggest impacts that yoga had was I had just come back from meeting my family, my biological family, and it wasn't maybe more than a week later I went to your first class you had actually even taught, and I sat in with you guys. Well, I didn't sit. I participated actively, um, and I was a bit out of shape, but it was great and it was very welcoming. A lot of really great people, but at the end of the class, as we sat there and you went over this mantra, I just laid on my back and started crying. Tears were streaming down the side of my face during the entirety of like the closing ceremony, as it were. Um, and that to me, there's such a strong spiritual link. There's almost like this mental connection, this alignment of like philosophy and body, that like everything just sort of combined into one. And uh, I mean, you were a very, very kind and a very gentle and very accommodating soul, and it affected me greatly. And I feel like, I mean, in terms of philosophy, um, I feel like you have a very strong connection to kindness and love and acceptance and warmth and making people feel like they belong. This is another reason I actually specifically wanted you on the show. And what would you say, I mean, as far as like people who want to do yoga for more than just the physical part of it? I mean, I guess philosophy is you connect with yourself as you live and you sort of
Mhm.
discover things for yourself. But like, what what sort of pushed your philosophy and your own alignment into like coinciding with your yoga, because you really encompass both of these things, the physical and the spiritual part, very significantly.
Mhm. So for me, it all started with I read this book called "The Body Keeps a Score," and I
Mm,
actually read this every year or so just to refresh on it, or every 2 years, something like that, when I can. And it simply talked a lot about how trauma is stored within the body. Whereas, and I want to preface this by saying I'm not against medication. I'm not against if you need it, like, please do. But it's a lot about how we have come to a place where often we'll take the Zoloft or whatever, and then we live our life that way, right? We've created the idea that mental health is a chemical imbalance. And while it is, right, like our chemicals are truly imbalanced in our brain, we often forget that there's healing that has to go along with that, right? So it's just like any illness. We can either put a band aid on it or we can actually sew it up, and we can make sure that we go through the proper steps to make sure that it heals well and
mm,
heals correctly. And and that's basically what this book implements or suggests. Is just like, okay, great, yes, let's make sure that we're getting, the medication or whatever, the band-aids that we need, but also let's dig a little deeper, right? Let's notice the fact that things like talk therapy significantly help people. Let's talk about how movement significantly helps people, how we actually store emotions and store like gunk in our hips. Or let's talk about the neuroplasticity of our brain, right? When we think negative thoughts, there's literally dark matter that is created in our brain, and that dark matter has to kind of be reversed. And how do we do that? A lot of self talk, a lot of love and gentleness. And then when I went to yoga school, they taught us a lot about the Yoga Sutras. And we think of yoga as in, okay, I'm going to get on my mat and I'm going to do these moves, this movement. I'm going to get my workout in and then I'm done. Bye.
mhm,
I did my yoga for the day. But the Yoga Sutras are 8 limbs, and the actual asana, which is the term for the movement that we do on our mat, that is just one limb out of eight. There's a lot of meditation. It's a
Mhm.
lot of self love and kindness. Um, it talks a lot about the Yoga Sutras, do talk a lot about if you're unkind to yourself, you're out of line. If you're unkind to other people, you're out of line. And it's this whole you bring the whole 8 limbs together to create your higher self or your higher mental
Mhm.
being. Um, and so that all of this just kind of impacted me and I have felt it, right? Like I've been in a yoga class just like you were in mine where there was this moment and I think the teacher was talking about an elephant getting stuck. And how simply the elephant was just stuck by a rope and all they had to do was just kind of tug that rope a little bit and then they would be set free.
Mm.
And I'm just bawling, literally bawling. Because how many times in our life, right, are we just in the way, right? Like
Mhm.
we have the courage and the power to just tug that rope a little bit, but we just it's uncomfortable and it's out of our safe zone, or we've had these traumas in our life that have just put us in this box all the time. All the time we get in these places. And it's beautiful how simple thing as connecting your mind and body while you're doing yoga to then also understanding that when you're done in your shavasana, which is the final pose, your corpse pose, most people, my favorite pose of all, that we're meant to just sit there and soak. There's there's also a lot of yogis who will sit up. They'll go straight into meditation because the point of asana within the 8 limbs of yoga is so that you get all these jitters out. You get all this movement out. You link the breath with your movement. And then once you're done with all the movements, you have the jitters out. You've moved lots. You can then meditate. Your mind's clear. Your
Mhm.
body doesn't want to fidget and you can look inward. And it's something that I'm still learning about, right? I'm still new on this journey, but
Sure.
um, it's fascinating to me, and it's beautiful how we are clearly able to start healing our past traumas through different resources, whatever resource works for you. For me, it's
Mhm.
inner child healing and meditation. Um, And I do a lot of inner child work after my asana, and I'm just sitting there and I'm going in and I'm talking to little Melissa, which is a whole other conversation. But but yeah, so it's we're all on our own little journeys, and I think it's important to one honor that, but also don't forget that it is our responsibility to heal our
Mhm.
trauma.
Sure.
Which sucks because what happened a lot of the things, not all of the things, but a lot of the things that has happened to me personally, there's been a lot of sexual abuse and even sexual abuse from my father and stuff like that. Like that happened to me, but it's still my responsibility now
For the
to
healing.
for the healing part, or I'm just going to be a garbage people to other people. And so what does that
Sure.
look like? And for
Yeah.
me, it's been yoga. And yeah,
Well, and I think getting a chance to share that with other people is probably just as healing because to become a teacher is really you're giving yourself, you're extending yourself, and when you heal people, that heals you.
right.
Yeah,
Right. And
people
that's
heal
literally
together.
exactly. And that's what the term namaste that you say at the end of the class literally means. It's the light in me, the goodness, the joy, the healing, the light in me
Hmm.
honors the light in you. It recognizes that and it recognizes that we are linked because of that light.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's a beautiful little phrase.
That's fantastic. I
Yeah.
appreciate yoga. I think a lot, and I need to have more discipline to actually do it because I'll wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm just too tired. I have to go do the thing. And so I sort of create excuses for myself, knowing that every single time I've actually committed to it, it has never not been good for me.
Yeah.
So there really is the discipline I think that I need to focus on. I need to work on.
Well, it is today is when we are doing this. It's Friday. I have a class tomorrow morning. See you there.
I hope so. If I didn't have a lunch tomorrow, I'd be there. But instead, I'm gonna go namaste my stomach.
Nice.
Does that work? Is that work? Am I allowed to can I use the term like that?
You know, you're a little whitewashing it, but it's
I
fine.
appropriate it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, straight white male just picking up these terms and saying, "Hey, look, here's it's mine now."
Yeah, my favorite is Nama Slay. I'm like, this has
Wow.
nothing to do with alright, it's fine. Let's continue to be problematic. Why
She
not?
exactly right. Exactly. Yeah. Don't do what I just did. But go enjoy your dinner and your yoga. That's the whole philosophy. So you have the film industry on one side, which has brought you a lot of joy, but also some strife. And it seems like that's also partly countered by the fact that you've now found sort of a counterweight to it
Mhm.
that helps you relax yourself, attune yourself, stay clear headed. But then right there in the center, sometimes you got to play some video games. And sometimes
Yes,
video games are great and relaxing, and sometimes they're terrible and stressful. So it sort of like throws you
yeah.
back on one side of the scale.
Yeah. No, as I've gone into this industry, the film industry, a little bit more, I've had to revert to the cozy games a little bit more
Oh, sure.
instead of
Yeah.
the League of Legends that I used to do and
Oh, so that's gonna
StarCraft,
that will
yeah.
kill you. Yeah, if you dive
No,
into
yeah. The StarCraft days, my StarCraft
Oh,
days, I was never fast enough on hotkeys. I wish I
oh,
was. I wanna pretend
no.
like I was. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was not. You have to be dedicated to be good at StarCraft, and
Or
for those of you who
Korean.
are
And this is not like a generalization, but like because like they literally made it like a national sport, that's why I'm throwing that out there,
sure.
to be
Alright.
clear. Right.
Here we go. No. No. But, I mean, yeah, it's more accepted there too, right? You know,
Yes,
here
it's
you're lazy if you play video games, but
often it's
there,
still kind of a stigma, but, like, I
it's
literally
a
went to
stigma.
Korea
Yeah.
in 1999, and I bought
Mhm.
StarCraft candy and StarCraft shirts and StarCraft soda,
Yes.
and it was like, this
And
is
it's just
literally a
there.
thing. It's a
They
thing.
love it. I love
Yeah.
it so much.
Yeah,
No,
that's
but
right.
yeah, and, uh, yeah, I love those. I used to love first person shooters at some point, but then
Like, competitive, or are you talking like a single player
no.
campaign?
Single player
Doom or
campaign.
okay.
Um, no, I was a big Destiny fan for
Oh,
a
yes, yes.
while.
Right.
Yeah,
You sort of fell off of Destiny, or was it just too much, or bad
I
updates?
couldn't be on every single day, and
Ah,
that was if you weren't on every single day, then you were behind, and
sure.
it just, yeah, I couldn't.
Did you ever do
Life.
Destiny 2, or did you just sort of forsook that in order to say, "Okay, I'll go ahead and just s Animal Crossing," or something that sort of, like, takes my mind and just or was Animal Crossing stressful for you? Because I know, like
No. I love Animal Crossing. So, Animal
okay.
Crossing has a special place in my heart simply because of the fact that my grandmother
Mm.
loved that game so much, and so now my whole entire family plays Animal Crossing,
Oh,
and
good. I know it's
we'll
one that you
do
loved, but you were, like, associated with the family through this game. That's
yeah. So
outstanding.
I like it, but I wish I had the dedication to finish my island. Um, I've yet to. I'm still to this day working on it. I still haven't finished it though.
What does
The
finished look
people
like to you? Like, that you'd never have to, like, change anything around again, like, you've fully like, it's done and you can stand back, look at it, cross your arms, and, like, nod in approval?
like not in approval. I'm like,
Okay.
yes, yes, this is
Okay.
good. This is
This is
good.
good.
No, yeah.
I
Another one
am
is
the casting director. Yeah. Okay.
yes, yes. No, another one is Stardew. Uh,
Oh god,
the
I put
real
so much time.
so much time in Stardew. The thing is they've added so many updates now that I, at one point, restarted Stardew because I was just like, I just want to restart because I know what I'm doing now, and I can finally like just kind of rush the first year and then really sink my teeth in instead of
Mhm.
kind of be scrambling for everything. The problem is there's so many updates to it now that I look at other people or, like, I'll watch streamers while I'm casting during the
Mhm.
day sometimes, and I'm just like, "How does your farm look like that? And where are you? I've never been there."
So this is my
And
question is, can even those games be stressful when you're comparing yourself to everybody else who's got, like, these space farms and you're sitting here on, like, Mud Island, you know?
I'm on the beach, like, really sad, and I haven't, like, upgraded any of
You're just
the
feeding
no.
crabs old potatoes, yeah.
It gives me motivation. The problem is
Oh,
that
good.
because I'm in the industry, I don't have enough time
Yeah.
to, like, really get into it, and so there's that desire there. I
Okay.
want to do it. I'm just waiting for the day that I just, like, don't have a show or movie for a while so that I can, like, just go at it.
So is in the film industry, is it in my mind, this is how I would function, of course, is like I would bring a Game Boy or at this point a Switch to a job because if you have a little bit of downtime, you pop it on, you play, you pick some potatoes, you sell them to the whatever, and like that does it. Do you bring your Switch with you to work, or is that sort of like you resist the temptation and put it aside?
So the funny thing is I actually don't work on set a whole lot anymore.
Oh
I
shoot,
work from this room, which is my office,
yes,
my home office, all the time. So I do, honestly, I do.
hey, hey,
So even
great.
today, I had some downtime this morning and I played some Dreamlight Valley for a few
That's the
minutes.
Disney one, is that correct?
It's a Disney
It's like
one,
Disney
yeah.
Stardew, Animal Crossing ish kind
Just
of
all of
life
it plugged
sim.
into one. They did that terrible thing that all games are doing now where they just released it unfinished, which I'm against, but at the same time, I'm like, it's Disney and it's got that Animal Crossing Stardew feel, so how
Right.
can I not?
Yeah.
Um, Usually I stop though when it just completely shuts down because it still does that, which is really lame. It just has that bug where it's just like, no, we lost
Just
connection.
just
You're
crash.
yeeted out of this
Yeah.
entire game. And I'm like, well,
Yep.
okay, just guess I'll go back to work.
Yeah, go do some yoga or whatever.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So I'm glad
But
you have
yeah.
a healthy balance, of course, of gaming because I like to game. I game less now than I ever have, but I like to try to do it leisurely instead of like obligationally for work.
Yes.
Um, and being able to like sink back into it occasionally is really really nice. But with that, we've got sort of your trifecta of again casting, yoga, and either
Dreaming.
angry League of Legends or peaceful Stardew Valley. Does that sound about
No
right?
in between.
No in betweens, exactly.
No
It's
in between
it's all
whatsoever.
radicals, exactly.
That's
Yeah,
all I got. Yeah.
black and white till death do us part. So
Mhm.
okay, perfect. Well, I've got a handful of questions for you
Okay.
that I just need some answers for. It sounds
Sounds
like a couple
good.
things you've sort of recommended already, but the first question I wanted to ask you was, do you have a favorite book that you would recommend? It sounded like you had one earlier, but is that a book you would instruct for other people to check out, or if you had just like to choose a book that you get to hand somebody and say, you got to look at this?
Fiction or nonfiction?
It could be really anything you want. If you want somebody to dive into the history of Mussolini, go for it. But also, if you want somebody
Oh,
to check out where the red fern grows,
Minecraft. No, just kidding.
yeah, I mean, sure.
No.
I mean, hey, look,
Bad
no
joke.
judgment here. No
Gosh.
judgment here.
No, judgment for me, from me.
Okay, okay,
Um, See, this is a hard one because that's my other thing is I also read a lot.
sure.
Um, so I think everyone should read The Body Keeps the Score. If you have any mental health issues ever,
Hmm.
whatsoever, have experienced grief, PTSD,
Yeah.
whatever, just read that book.
And
Just
I'm going
sink
to go
your
out on a
teeth in it.
limb and say everybody to
Yeah.
some degree does. So maybe this is
Yes,
a book simply for everybody.
for everybody. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, Now if I'm going to fiction, because I want to go to fiction,
Oh, sure. Let's go ahead and do
um,
both.
this is very, very book talky, and if you're on book talk, you understand what I mean by book talk. Um, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, which is not new to anyone who knows that genre. Um, but it just has such a special place in my heart. It deals with a lot of hard conversations while still
Mm,
being like a very beautiful story. Um, and also being how do I say this? It hits the hard topics while still leaving you feeling good inside.
oh, good.
Don't get me wrong, it'll make you cry, but um, trigger warning for anyone who has gone through physical abuse.
Mm,
So,
sure. Okay. So both recommended to check it. Okay. That sounds fantastic. Reiterate the titles once more.
yeah. Okay, so The Body Keeps the Score.
The Body Keeps a
And
Score.
yes, and it's ends with us.
It ends with us. Perfect. Okay. Excellent. Two to check out. Now, how about, and here's one I've got for you. If you can step away from watching the background, a favorite film or a TV show, like one that you
Okay.
just like love, something that you just resonates with you.
Okay. Gosh, these are tough questions.
Oh, good.
Why? I don't understand why.
I could ask math questions instead.
No,
Were
I'd
there
be
objective
equally as
answers?
bad.
Oh yeah.
Equally as bad.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Um, just don't ask me questions. How's that?
Okay.
No.
Perfect interview material. I'm in agreement.
Um,
I'll let you run the whole thing, and I'll just hang out and listen.
Perfect. Actually, I'm asking you the questions. What is
That's
your movie? While I'm thinking, because I don't want dead air, what is your favorite?
Oh, God of all time?
Yes.
Probably Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That was too easy. Really?
Well,
Why? Give me the why.
because it's a seamless blend of animation and live action in a time where computers weren't really used, and the acting chops with Bob Hoskins and Christopher Lloyd, uh, it was the most convincing thing, and the quality of animation is almost unparalleled still to this day.
That's fair. No, I agree
So,
with that.
but I just did a podcast where I did my like top 5 favorite films of all time, and that's also consistently number one. So it's very easy for me to pull that one out.
Okay. I'll
So,
have to get one of those. I'll have to get like this is my go-to. I think for me it's Arrival, um, with Amy Adams.
Amy Adams, the more recent Arrival. There's an old one with Charlie
Yes.
Sheen that I think I mix up often. So,
Yeah,
okay,
no.
no
The
good.
newer
Yeah.
one. The
Okay,
newer
the new
one.
Arrival. New
Not
Arrival.
Charlie Sheen.
Okay,
No hate, no shade. All love, peace and love. But yeah. So the reason would simply be it's a lot about humanity and
mm.
communication.
Well,
And
that's hugely important.
right. And simply about the fact that, like, let's not judge a book by its cover. Let's learn a little bit of empathy and communication, and maybe we'll get a little further in life.
I like that.
Um,
So, real quick, what does the cover of The Arrival look like, and does it live up to the movie?
I mean, isn't it? If I'm thinking about it, like, it's just the egg shape of the spaceship that comes here. No, it has nothing to do with the movie.
Okay, so watch the movie. This is the classic example of don't judge the book by the cover.
Yeah, don't judge the book by the cover.
Okay,
It's also one of those of just it's open-ended, so you kind of think what you will about it,
okay,
but it'll make you feel. And it's one of those movies that I mentioned early on that inspired me to go into the film industry, where it's just like, oh, I want to make people think beyond their box. Um, and I think it does a great job of that.
excellent, excellent, interpretive. I'm into that. Okay, now maybe the hardest question of all. Also, unless you're me. Okay,
Mhm, mhm.
what's a food you're gonna recommend to me?
Oh, see, gosh, these are really hard.
I
One,
know.
because I'm vegan
Wait,
and
well, you know
gluten
what?
free.
Maybe that also narrows it down significantly. So you're sort of trapped into saying, well, you know, it's got to be an Udi's bagel or something with green onions on it. I don't know,
I don't
but
know.
but
No,
also, heck, I think
there's.
this the kind of limitations are important because for people who are listening who might say, oh, I'm struggling with gluten free and vegan diets, I need a
Mhm.
recommendation.
Well, okay, so there is this place in New York that I fell in love with, and
Hmm.
obviously you can't get it here in New Mexico,
Shoot.
but they have a cookbook, and it's called By Chloe, and it is some of the best vegan food I've had of all time. You're getting good nutrients. There's some there's a really good like Chipotle bowl.
Mm.
Um, that's just it's delectable. It's so good. I'm dreaming about it. I want to go to New York and get one. I've yet to perfect it. One because I'm just not a great cook, to be
That's
completely
fair.
honest. I wish I was, but I'm just not.
You
Um,
make it edible enough to survive.
right, exactly.
Okay, well, that's important.
My diet like consumes of just tofu and cauliflower rice. That's pretty much the extent of I want to
Do you
eat.
ever have like tofu cereal with like
No, I
rice
have
milk or
not.
something? I haven't either, but I'm just
Interested.
curious. Yeah, if you like deep fried tofu and then like put it in a bowl of rice milk.
See, that wouldn't be gluten-free if you deep fry it.
Deep fry it in egg. No, I was gonna say egg. Um, I guess you could do it like in an egg bath with potato flakes.
You can't do an egg bath.
Why not?
Egg is not vegan.
Look, a synthetic
Not
egg, artificial egg.
Okay, sure. Where are you getting this artificial egg from?
I
I'd like to know. It made baking so much easier. Please let me
well, don't they
know.
have like those tubes of eggs that you can like? They're I was gonna say fictional eggs, but um, vegan eggs that like or egg substitute, I suppose.
So pretty much the egg substitutes that I know about are going to be like garbanzo beans, which doesn't really taste the same,
No.
or bananas, which also doesn't really taste the same.
Okay, so maybe what if you just put tofu in an air fryer and then poured it into a bowl and then poured rice milk on it?
That
Oh, we're
sounds
good.
really gross.
I
That
well,
sounds
yeah,
kind
but
of gross.
it's more it's more about can we rather than should we?
Can we? Yes.
Okay.
If you want me to, I'll try it. I'll
I
report back.
actually well, we could do this at the shop sometime, and that way you wouldn't
Yes.
have to do this alone. And I like cereal, so cereal is in big quotes for those listening. Yeah,
Rice milk in particular, too. Not even almond or like
I love
oat
rice milk.
milk.
I don't know what it is, but
Okay.
rice milk's my fictional milk of choice.
It's the only way I'm gonna. It's either a meat product or it's just fictional.
It's right, exactly.
Came from a chicken or it's fictional.
Yep, complete fabrication. Perfect. Okay, so you're recommending this place in New York that has a cookbook that's accessible
Yes, the cookbook is accessible. It's the same exact title. It's called By Chloe.
by Chloe.
Um,
Okay,
yes.
perfect. By Chloe. All right, and now here's one of my favorite ones, an obligatory question. What's a favorite video game? Now you've already listed five or six prior, but like, is there another one that has like a special spot that really just sort of like?
I think we actually talked about it briefly in your shop. Kingdom Hearts for me.
Oh
I think
yes,
it
yes.
was one of the first times that because this is a whole other conversation, but that I felt as a female, I was allowed to enjoy a video game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I remember, like, I mean, people fit into that narrative and that stereotype of like, oh, it's for guys, it's for boys.
Right.
And it really was. It was pushed on me as well, but I just always had a weird love. And thankfully, I had a high school boyfriend that really enjoyed video games that further introduced me into it, which is where I got really into it. But Kingdom Hearts was just that one staple beginner video game for me that I felt like I was allowed to play and
Okay,
allowed
this
to
is more
enjoy.
welcoming to you. It's sort of like a gateway
Yeah.
for,
Mhm.
not like the typical male audience kind
Right.
of thing. Which I'm glad
Exactly.
we're also starting to like really like escape away from that as well too. It's cool to see so much
Yeah.
stuff branching out. But Kingdom Hearts very accessible, and that's plus the animation was beautiful. So it's
It
like
was so
watching a
beautiful.
3D Disney game. Yeah.
Mhm. Which
Okay.
is exciting for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So perfect Kingdom Hearts. And then the final question is, and this is one of my favorites to ask anybody because it's difficult and not difficult at the same time. But if you could just give one piece of advice to the world,
It's gonna say weird at first, but I'm going somewhere with it.
please.
To get on the floor a little bit more. And the reason why I say that is just, especially in Western culture at least, we have all these expectations of what our life should be, what it should look like, um, who we should be, what we should look like. And we don't humble ourselves enough, right? These are our ideologies of what the world should be. And the reality is we have a good amount of control over our life, right? Of what we do, but a lot of things are completely out of our control. And the world doesn't owe us anything.
Right.
It owes us nothing. The world isn't going to make you successful or not successful. It's not going to hand you your healing, whether it be through trauma, or it's not going to hand you your business, right? You have to put in the work, and you have to humble yourself. In relationships, you what if you're just headstrong, you're just going to be narcissistic, and you just butt heads with people all the time unless you humble yourself, right? And recognize that the person next to you is just literally the person next to you.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just simply say, like, get on the floor, humble yourself. The world doesn't owe you anything, but you do, right?
Yeah. You made me tear up. I mean, like, no joke. I think that's it's an outstanding way to put it. Is we are never too good for anything, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's a really beautiful sentiment, and it sort of equalizes all of us when we allow ourselves to, you know, be amongst everybody else, you know. And I think that's what we should also do. Is everybody should be our equal, our peer, our our life companions, whatever our proximity is to them. That's phenomenal.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that.
of course. Yeah.
Oh, Melissa,
Yes.
um, where can people find you? Do we have like an Instagram or a Twitter or public pages where people can access you that is comfortable to you? I don't want to be like, hey, what's your address? But like, what do we
Well,
got as
Twitter's
far as
dying,
the
so I
Twitter
don't
is
know what
currently
you
tanking itself pretty
it's
significantly.
it's like Elon Musk is doing something over there. I don't know what it
Something,
is, but he's doing
yeah.
something.
Just But
Anyway,
yeah, yeah,
s
Instagram, Facebook,
sure, Instagram is fine. I'm probably most active, but also not very active on social media, to be honest.
sure.
Most active on Instagram, which is simply my name. It's Melyssa, Melyssa, and then Zurasky, Zurasky, and that's me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I want to take some time to really thank you for taking the time to do this with me.
Yeah.
This podcast, I think, thrives on hopefully the upcoming diversity. And you've already given, I think, a really great, important perspective that, I have yet to have on the podcast. And I really hope people can listen to this and resonate with it and take something away and simply empathize more to try to be a better person.
Thank you so much for having me. It's honestly such an honor. I
Well, I'm
really
glad.
appreciate it.
I'm
Yeah.
glad. Thank you. And so, thank you for being part of this podcast. And I want to thank you, Melissa, for helping create humanity. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.